Hello everyone, I'm Bo from Brutal Commentary, and today I'm going to be breaking down our co-main event for UFC Perf. In this matchup, we have Jimmy Crute versus Ivan Erslan. Crute is 13, 4, and 2 in his overall career. 1, 2, and 2 in his last 5 fights, those two being draws. Meanwhile, Erslan is 14 and 5 as a professional and 3 and 2 in his last 5 fights. Looking at Crute's last 5, in his latest fight, he got absolutely destroyed by Jamal Hill in about 40 seconds. Then he fought Alonzo Menifield to a draw. Then at UFC 290, he got submitted by Alonzo Menifield in a fight where it looked like he had retired, as after that fight he didn't fight for a while, but then made his return at UFC 312 in February and fought to another draw against Rodolfo Bellato. Then most recently at UFC 18 this July, he finally got his first UFC win in about 4 years when he submitted Marcin Prachnio in the first round via armbar. Meanwhile, Erslan, a former contender from KSW, he has not had a good UFC run so far. So far, he's 0-2 in the promotion, and I think if he loses, especially if he loses via finish, I think he might be getting the pink slip. So far in his last 2 UFC fights, he fought Ion Cutelaba to a split decision. That really wasn't a split decision. And most recently at UFC 315, he lost to Navajo Sterling via decision. Overall, these two are similar when it comes to overall skill sets to some degree. Now, there's one aspect of their games that eclipses the other, but I'll get to that in a second. In terms of their striking, both are somewhat plotters. They don't really have too much footwork. They're not really bouncing off the balls of their feet. They're not really cutting angles all that much, but they both got really good power. For Ivan Erslan, that power is what helped him become a contender for the belt at KSW, where mostly it was his big right hand that helped him win a lot of the fights. Even in the losses, though, to Sterling and Cutelaba, he had his moments mostly hurting Cutelaba, and even using some of his strongman wrestling, he has some good ability to get to the hips, but he doesn't have too many overall wrestling techniques. It's not like he'll either trip you, sweep, single leg, hip toss, double leg. You get my idea. But he is pretty powerful, all things considered, for light heavyweight. And like I said, he has pretty good power overall. Crute is about the same. He's a plotter himself. He's got really good power in his own right. He knocked out Modestas Bukauskas years ago with his own devastating right hand. And there was a time, though, when he was undefeated, or at the very least had maybe one loss in the career, and he seemingly was just kind of running over everybody, especially like with wins against the aforementioned Bukauskas and the submission win to Paul Craig. At least at that time, before Paul Craig was going in the real downhill. Now, Crute himself also has some wrestling to him. And again, like Erslan, it's not the best wrestling. Most of it is he has good technique to get the shot, but oftentimes he uses muscle over technique to finish the takedown. That being said, his grappling is superb. He's got very good positional control. And while I will admit, getting submitted by Alonzo Menifield is pretty damning, he still has some good submissions to his game. Mostly is his arm traps. Like I said, he's got a Kimura win over Paul Craig and the arm bar to Marcin Prachnio. Now, granted, Marcin Prachnio is one of the worst fighters in light heavyweight in terms of the grappling, but that just shows Crute's ability to handle a guy like him once it got to the mat and cinching up the arm bar pretty quickly. I'm wondering if whoever loses also loses their job. Like I said, I know Ivan Erslan will probably be on the chopping block because they'll be winless in the UFC. But at the same time, Crute, I'm surprised he got back in the UFC. I honestly thought he would have like I said, I thought after the Alonzo Menifield fight, seemingly he did retire, put his gloves in the cage. Or at the very least, if he came back, he would at least have to go through the regional scene first, kind of revamp himself. But that wasn't the case. But still, though, having one win in the last 4 years, and before that, even if you didn't lose, you couldn't win these fights. It basically got down to a draw. It's not a good look. But I think, though, Jimmy Crute still has some abilities to him. Like I said, he is a plotter. That's the worst part about it with his striking. But he still has some really good hands. He does have some good kicks. I do worry about his chin. Ivan Erslan can crack And if he can nail Crute, especially early in the first round when they're both fresh, I think that's going to spell disaster for Crute. But at the same time, if this gets taken down to the ground, I see Crute submitting Erslan pretty easily, too. I think it all comes down to how the first round plays out. If Erslan can crack Crute early and he kind of keeps that momentum throughout the first round, I see him winning eventually via knockout or by the decision. But if Crute can survive an early storm and he can take the fight down and show repeatedly that he can do it and prove he's the better overall wrestler and grappler, I see him winning via submission to decision. Again, it really depends how you play out in the first round. Now, the odds for this fight, though, minus 185 for Crute, plus 150 for Erslan. Makes sense. Crute still has shown to have overall better skills in the UFC than Erslan has. Plus, even if some of his wins, I'm not talking about practical, but even if some of his wins were years ago, he showed an ability to at least win at the UFC level. Erslan hasn't. Now, in their overall specs, they're not overly different. Both are the same height at 6'2". Crute has about a 1.5 inch reach. He's with a 74 inch reach to 72.5. Overall, I got to go with Jimmy Crute. Like I said, I trust his ground skills a lot more than I trust Iven Erslan to find the perfect shot. Now, he's fought brawlers akin to him like Ion Cutelaba. And then he's fought tacticians like Navajo Sterling. Crute's somewhere in between. He has some good technique on the feet, but at the same time, he can't get lulled into a brawl, and he doesn't have as refined techniques as Sterling, but he still has some where he can at least hold back at times, unlike Cutelaba has at times. But I think the ground skills are the number one factor as why I'm picking him. I think if he can take down Erslan, he can get the submission. And that's what I'm going to lean to in this fight. So, my official prediction, I'm going to go with Jimmy Crute, and I got to go with him via submission. Decision is very possible, and I do see it live in this fight. But, again, I'm a guy who likes violence, and I'm hoping for the latter. And I'm going to think a good submission win. Maybe armbar, maybe Kimura. Like I said, his arm attacks are probably his best submissions. But you never know what could happen when you try and play the ground game. That being said, that's been my prediction for our co-main event. If you like the video, comment and subscribe. I always love to hear your thoughts. Next up, we'll have our main event, Carlos Ulberg versus Dominic Reyes. With that being said, I've been Bo from Brutal Commentary. Thank you all for listening. Take care.